will be a model for the rest of the continent once signed. So, now you know why I am so enthusiastic about the Kenyan prospects and the Kenyan investment climate. But when I talk to American investors, they have some questions, and there are room for improvement. The Ruto administration has made great strides and is committed to building a business-friendly environment. But if it is to accomplish the goal, the government's going to have to address a few issues. And the first is taxes. Kenya must have a consistent, transparent, and fairly administered national tax policy to attract and retain foreign direct investment and accelerate economic development. The tax rates don't need to be the lowest. They need to be the most consistent. And all of you know, some work still needs to be done, but the recent finance bill had many changes that will make Kenya's tax policy more consistent and therefore more bankable by foreign direct investment. Without a doubt, corruption is a critical issue and one that must be addressed for Kenya to reach its full potential in all areas of development. Everyone knows corruption leads to misuse of public resources, slows economic growth and job creation, and damages the investment climate, as well as undermining equal participation in the prosperity of this country. However, while corruption does remain a challenge in Kenya, as in other developing markets, third-party measures of corruption indicate positive trends and some progress in recent years. According to the United States Millennium Challenge Corporation's country scorecard for 2023, Kenya's score for control of corruption was 0.28, representing its third passing score in a row and its highest score to date. But to put this number in perspective, Kenya's 0.28 was superior to India's 0.18 and Vietnam's 0.19. And what I can tell you is Americans don't give it a second thought to invest in India. In addition, President Ruto has cracked down on corruption, calling out government agencies that engage in unscrupulous practices and firing government officials involved. Now, I also get a lot of questions about Kenya's debt. Kenya, like many developing countries, is burdened with high debt, limiting its ability to fund public services and infrastructure in line with its ambitions. According to the IMF, Kenya's debt to GDP ratio is 69%, but this number is not an outlier amongst regional averages. For comparison, Malaysia's debt to GDP stood at 69% in 2021, while India's ratio was 83% in 2022. Another area I get a ton of questions on is cargo clearance. Now, despite improving logistics, the delivered cost of a container to Kenya remains significantly higher than the container shipments landing in Europe or Asia. So there is room for improvement on cost, but here's a great fact. Back in 2010, it took over 11 days to clear a container at the port of Mombasa. Today, it takes 3.5 days. And this reduction has occurred despite cargo increasing over the past 5 years from 27 million metric tons in 2016 to nearly 35 million metric tons in 2021. So this is an important thing for Americans. This is an excellent opportunity, I think, to put to rest the argument that Kenya is not a manufacturing country. True, Kenya has room to grow in this sector, but manufacturing is happening here. And let me give you a few examples of Kenya's manufacturing prowess. Gearbox in Nairobi County, a high-mix, low-flow electronics manufacturer, runs a state-of-the-art, what we call a surface mount assembly line. And in November of 2022, began manufacturing Raspberry Pi's Pico product for the African market. Gearbox's production quality, catch this, meets or exceeds that of Raspberry Pi's other production sites in Wales and Japan, producing a first-pass yield of 99.6%. Semiconductor Technologies, a U.S.-owned semiconductor manufacturing and nanotechnology company in Nyeri County, is growing rapidly and has hired more than 80 Kenyan engineers in the last 12 months. Kenya's Revital Healthcare in Kilifi County is one of the largest manufacturers of medical products in Africa, producing 48 devices and exporting to 28 countries. Isuzu has operated an East Africa assembly plant in Nairobi since 1977, selling more than 90,000 units with more than 15 models. And there is also a robust and growing e-mobility manufacturing assembly industry in Kenya. Kenya is the future for Africa's 2- and 3-wheel e-vehicles and e-buses. And lastly, when we talk about trade, we have to talk about apparel and apparel manufacturing. Last year, Kenya recorded its highest ever apparel exports to the United States, over $540 million, employing nearly 200,000 Kenyans, mostly young women. Leading U.S. apparel brands sourcing from Kenya include PVH, which includes Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein, Contour, which includes Lee and Wrangler, and several more, including Walmart and Levi's. And what we hear from these brands, they want more Kenya apparel manufacturing, both because of the high quality of labor and Kenya's leadership in renewable energy. Brands are steadily moving production operations to Kenya from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, and China because of what you have to offer. And more of this is on the way. I think apparel manufacturing may be the biggest near-term employment opportunity in all of Kenya. So clearly, there is something happening here. It's abundantly clear to me, and every day I try to make abundantly clear to the international audience that Kenya is open for business. Over the past year, the Kenyan government has been implementing real measures to improve economic conditions and create a business-friendly investment climate throughout the country. Following months of deliberation and consultations with the political and the business community, President Ruto announced the following reforms at the March American Chamber of Commerce Business Summit. A consistent, fair, predictable, and enduring tax regime. Alignment of Kenya's data protection regulations with the multilateral global cross-border private rules framework. A 6-month deadline for KRA to either pay all verified tax refund claims or provide offsets. Elimination of the VAT on export services. Elimination of the domestic equity requirement for ICT companies. Removal of tax on stock-based compensation for employees of all startups. And commitment to adhere to the OECD two-pillar solution framework for digital services tax. And finally, a commitment to revitalize Kenya's special economic zones to maximize their competitiveness, and more reforms are in the pipeline. As you can see, there is so much opportunity in Kenya, and an opportunity to bring the U.S. and Kenyan businesses closer together. All of what I'm about to announce has happened in the last 12 months. In agriculture, Del Monte, the largest private sector employee in Kenya, has invested $5.5 million in a new state-of-the-art fresh fruit packing facility in Kiambu County. Kentegra, a U.S.-Kenya company on the forefront of restoring Kenya as the leading producer of organic insecticide, is building a new $15 million pyrethrum refinery in Nakuru County, benefiting over 90,000 farmers. Regen Organics, an incredibly innovative company founded by young MIT graduates, they're like 27, turning waste into fertilizer, fuel, and animal feed. They will expand their farm and organic waste collection, more than doubling their production of affordable, locally produced agriculture inputs, benefiting 10,000 farmers, and they're building a new $7 million factory that will create 500 jobs in Kakamega County. In apparel, the industry that continues year-on-year expansion, new partnerships have been launched with several leading manufacturing companies, including MAS and Mega, Coast Apparel, and UAL. And they will create at least 20,000 additional jobs and increase exports by 200 million in the next year. Many of these investments are in Machakos County. Best Corporation, also in Machakos, will launch a new apparel manufacturing facility in mid-2023 with plans to hire 2,400 new employees. And NextGen will build a state-of-the-art apparel labeling and packaging facility that has already broken ground and will be operational in September. In ICT and innovation, CCI Global, the largest business process outsourcing company in Kenya, has doubled its workforce to 8,000, In the next 6 months, they'll add 4,000 jobs in Kenya, in Kiambu County, for American clients like United Airlines, Spirit Airlines, JetBlue, AT&T, and Shipped. In energy, Malele Energy, a U.S. company, just concluded a deal to acquire part of the Turkana wind power project, one of the largest in Africa, and producer over 20% of Kenya's electricity in 2022, with huge plans for expansion. And last but certainly not least, in the medical pharma industry, the government of Kenya and Moderna finalized an agreement to build a new $500 million vaccine manufacturing facility in Kiambu County. This will be the only such facility on the African continent for Moderna and their first factory outside the United States. Moderna's investment should be a catalyst for the medical industry in Africa, producing over 500 million vaccines a year. All of this has happened in the last 12 months. So all you need to do, Mr. President, is do that again in the next 12 months. And there are more exciting developments happening every day. American sports associations like the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, and the entertainment icon, the Grammys, are all currently looking for a home in Kenya. And the television and movie industries are discovering Kenya too. Everyone thinks Nigeria has the market on this, but just look at the fact that Kenya now has a Real Housewives of Nairobi. So, there are many reasons why global businesses are considering or should consider Africa, and specifically Kenya and your counties, for trade and investment opportunity. This is your opportunity. What are your priorities? What is your sales pitch? And as I said at the beginning of this presentation, when I was the CEO of HP, I only thought of doing business in Africa about 1% of the time. American companies are used to doing business with Europe and Asia. How will you convince them to make doing business in Kenya just as routine? I encourage you to take this presentation. There's no trademark on this presentation. Take this presentation and tell the story of why Africa, why Kenya, and why your county. Why Garissa? Why Mombasa? Why Isiolo? Why Nakuru? Why any county in the country? You should be able to answer the question, why Africa, why Kenya, and why your county? So to conclude, the United States and Kenya are open for business. And to quote President Ruto, Kenya means business. So we have work to do. We need to roll up our sleeves and deliver the results. The American people and your constituents deserve our best efforts to expand shared economic opportunity and growth. Asante sana.